I mean, until
with the Hello, welcome inside Fever Insider Live. Brian Hench and Chloe Peterson here with you, fresh off of Fever practice for today, August 20th. Chloe is back from her wedding, which I understand was wonderful.
it was great.
It's a good time for Chloe. I'm back from Connecticut. It was also a time.
Wonderful.
There were good times, there were bad times, but most of the times it was Connecticut. So do with that information what you will. The ocean is really pretty though, which is always fun. Chloe left and a lot of stuff happened. Obviously, I thought for sure, honestly, that when you left, that the biggest thing would be they went to Washington and they lost again. And that's a real bummer because it's a game they should have won, a game they could have won. And instead they put themselves behind the 8 ball and a must win in Connecticut. And then they went out to Connecticut and fell behind by 20 and were just getting the doors beaten off of them. And I thought, oh, that'll be the biggest thing. And then Sophie Cunningham got hurt. Yeah. And now suddenly, Chloe, we have to open the show with obviously another injury. Second or third season-ending injury in 10 days. Sophie Cunningham goes down with the torn MCL. Just thoughts.
Obviously brutal for the Fever. Sophie was obviously playing very well when it came to everything. And she had just gotten back into the starting lineup, or not just, she'd been in the starting lineup for a while, but she was playing really well in the starting lineup, really gelling with all the players. And she was, I think, their, emotional leader too, in a sense. She was, considered, I think, to be the glue in a way of like keeping them all together through these tough injuries. First, the Sydney Colson with that torn ACL, and then Erin McDonald with the right foot. But to see her go down too, she was a big veteran voice, and that's going to be something they're lacking for the rest of the season.
Absolutely. If the stream is unstable, just let me know in the comments. We're shooting this from the office today where neither of us have full internet access, so a little bit of dicey. But it's when Cunningham goes down, I didn't see it like watching it at the arena. We were sitting above the basket where she went down on, but I was kind of following the play. Mm-hmm. So I see her go down there, play stops, like, oh, Leah must have gotten called for some silly foul or whatever happened. And then you turn, you see everybody kind of running the other way. And it's they attend to Sophie. She's on the floor, grasping her knee, yelling. And I asked Stephanie White, what's going through your head as you're going down there? And she's like, holy shit, which fair, I think was going through a lot of people's mind just on a human level. It sucks to see somebody go down like that. And then she's like, crap. And then your mind goes to just trying to calm down Sophie Cunningham, make sure that she's okay. And then she said for her, it kind of goes to okay, how do we fix this? How do we manage? And she said that's how she kind of copes with it, is her mind just shifts to more of the pragmatic side of things, I guess, which is a good quality, obviously, for a coach and is important for a coach. Just how do we get through this? How do we address it? And for the next quarter and a half, badly, I would say. Yeah. It went bad.
Yeah. I mean, I watched the game from home on Sunday, or from Wisconsin on Sunday, and it did not look good. I almost turned it off because I didn't really care that much, but I'm glad that I kept watching it. We went back and forth between the Brewers game, but it was obviously the best or the biggest comeback in franchise history, because they were down by 21 at one point, and then obviously Kelsey Mitchell had the game of her life in the second half. I think it was only 4 points in the first quarter, and then she had 34 in the second half in overtime. To have, I believe it was close to her career high of.
She matched it.
She matched her career high, and it was just, I think it was a game that they desperately needed, because you have that loss to Washington, and then if you would lose to Connecticut too, this was supposed to be the easy stretch of their schedule. And, taking that loss to Dallas, the loss to Washington, the loss to Connecticut all at once, and then they go into this really tough part where they play Minnesota back-to-back. And then they have to play Phoenix again. They play Seattle. They play Los Angeles, which shouldn't really be a tough game, but it probably will be a tough game for them, because for some reason Los Angeles just beats the Fever every time this season. So I think it was a very good, despite Sophie's season-ending injury, it was very good for them to win that game, just to have that, have that morale in a sense.
21 points. There's some pieces from that game on Sunday that we want to talk about. But first, I thought, this clip from Stephanie White talking about just how our group came back and pulled that off despite losing Sophie Cunningham. And I mean, that alone is a lot to overcome. When you see a teammate go down like that, again, it's pretty traumatic. Second time that's happened in 10 days. Where you see somebody go down with a torn knee, a bad traumatic knee injury like that. I mean, that's enough on its own, let alone to be down 21 in the third quarter, 14, I think it was at the start of the fourth, and then, or 15 at the start of the fourth, and then you go down 14 when you start your run with like 6 minutes left, and to come back and to win it then in overtime is just stunning. Here's what Stephanie White had to say after the game. Resiliency, things like what happened to Sophie. What is it about them that seems to bring the best out in them?
It's going to be hard to talk about without getting emotional. I mean, first and foremost, they're good human beings. You know, they're selfless, they're tough, they don't care who gets the credit, they don't care whose day it is. They got something inside of them that you just can't teach. And, you know, they bring it out of each other. And it allows us to go through these incredibly tough times that we're going through, and always gives us a chance. And I'm just so incredibly proud of them for continuing to believe, for continuing to pull together, for continuing to step up. I mean, every single person on this roster impacts winning for us. And every single person on this roster is valued for how they impact winning, whether they play a second or not. They give and give and give to this team. And I'm thankful for this group.
Fever coach Stephanie White following that improbable, borderline miraculous win over the Connecticut Sun on Sunday. I know that for whatever reason, for a swath of the fan base, she's become their favorite punching bag. I think a lot of it's irrational, to be honest. I think that you can disagree with in-game decisions, and I think that that's part of sports. I don't think that you can argue that she's the right person for the job, just her ability to keep this group together and to continue pulling the right strings. I think on the one side, you know, to be critical, I thought in that Washington game, they should have at least tried Chloe Bibby. I know that they had something in their mind of how they wanted things to look defensively, and maybe there's something else there that they just, you know, didn't want out there publicly. But I think that what Bibby brings is a three-point shooter, and offensively, it would have made sense to at least try her as a spark. On the other side of it, what she did Sunday, pulling the Bree Turner string, was brilliant. Yeah. She put her in there, and it worked beautifully in stabilizing the defense and giving them that spark off the bench with a player who hasn't had hasn't been super effective this year and has just kind of been buried at the end of the bench. We've had a few questions about her, but she stayed ready for the moment and stepped up in a big way.
Yeah, I think, you know, obviously Steph has had a tough go of it with all these injuries, and obviously it's difficult to keep a team together through, you have 2 season-ending injuries in the same game, and then, you know, 10 days later, when you're just trying to figure it out with this, you know, this new team with Odyssey Sims coming in, with Kyra Lambert coming in for those 2 games, and then you have another season-ending injury to one of your most important players on the team. So I think she's done a good job, you know, of, you know, big picture keeping the team together.
Speaking of Bree Turner, I mean, just what she did was excellent. I don't have the clip here. Oh, here it is. A clip with Stephanie White. We asked her today about Bree Turner and just what she brings defensively for this group.
Using Bree in spot minutes, just defensive versatility. You know, she can guard 1 through 5, and we knew we needed defensive presence, you know, in that game, and brought her in, and she did a great job. You know, she guarded Marina for a little while so that we could spell a break. I mean, it takes so much to come back from down 20 that we knew we needed some fresh legs, and we knew we needed them particularly on the defensive end of the floor. And so we got her in on the wing early, and then we're able to move her to Tina to give some length, because we knew that Tina was going to get touches as time wound down, and we were able to bring our guards back to chase Marina. So you know, that Breezy's been the consummate pro. I mean, she's a great locker room person. She understands her role, and she comes in and she impacts. You know, we often say stay ready so you don't have to get ready. She's one that you don't have to worry about. She's also a really high IQ player, so if she doesn't get reps in practice, she knows what to do on the floor, and so we trust her. And she was big in those moments.
Stephanie White on the contributions there. Bree Turner coming up big there, and the Beavers went over Connecticut. Obviously, too, Kelsey Mitchell. I think the way that Stephanie White said is that she's been following her since she was a freshman in college, and she just keeps finding ways to amaze and surprise her. And Sunday was another example of that. 38 points after, like Chloe said, a really quiet first half. Any other takeaways, thoughts from that Connecticut game, Chloe?
Not really.
The other big thing then, obviously, with Sophie Cunningham going up, where the roster moves, you can see them going across the bottom there. Shey Peddy signed to a 7-day contract, and that's not related to Sophie Cunningham directly in terms of the transaction logs, because it can't be, but it is related to her in a way that they cut Kyra Lambert in order to add Shey Peddy and add some more experience back in the roster, kind of fill some of that void that was left by Sophie Cunningham when she went down.
Yeah, it's all, what roster hardship semantics. The Fever are currently eligible for 2 hardship waivers, and they were using them with, Caitlin Clark being out, and then obviously Sydney Colson, Erin McDonald out for the season. So they're currently eligible for 2 hardship contracts, which they were using on Odyssey Sims and Kyra Lambert. And then, they won't be eligible for a third hardship or they won't be eligible to sign a third player with a third hardship waiver until after Sophie Cunningham misses a game. So they kind of had to make a decision in that way where they kind of brought on Lambert to, be a body that if they needed her for depth purposes, they would play her, but they really wanted her to be more of a developmental piece in the league and just help her develop, because she obviously had not played in the WNBA before then, and she could develop behind, Sophie, behind AB, and behind all these people. But then obviously when Sophie Cunningham went down, they needed someone who had that experience. So that's why they made the decision to release Lambert 5 days into her 7-day contract and then sign Shey Peddy, who has, she has 6 years of WNBA experience, but she was first drafted in 2012 to the Chicago Sky. She never ended up playing for Chicago. She got waived in training camp. And then she played 7 years overseas. She played with Kelsey Mitchell. She played with Brianna January. She said today she's played with 4 or 5 players on the team. And she didn't make her WNBA debut until 2019 with the Mystics. And her best years came in Phoenix while she was playing with Sophie Cunningham, playing with Brianna Turner. And, she has that experience as a point guard that the Fever needed. And just that experience as a WNBA veteran, someone who knows what they're doing, someone who knows how the league works. They just needed someone like that, and they couldn't, keep Lambert and have someone like that. But after Friday, once Cunningham misses a game, they'll be able to have that third waiver for the third hardship spot. And I've been told they're planning on signing a third hardship player as well. So it could be Lambert coming back, or they could be in the mix to find someone else.
Let's hear from Shey. Let's hear from the newest Indiana Fever player, Shey Peddy. She spoke today after practice, and we're just going to start firing off some clips here.
Leadership, some stability, steadiness, and defense. I feel like that's where my thing is, defense. We have a lot of scorers. Obviously, I want to come down, be aggressive, hit down my threes when I can, but my thing is to get the ball to where it needs to be and be on defense, be up on the guards, making sure everybody's in their right spots, running the offense really well. I've been called a steady Betty, so I feel like, you know what you're going to get out of me. Like, I'm not going to do too much, not going to go out of my game, just continue to be the player I always am. They called me on Monday and said, they were looking for a player, obviously, when Sophie went down. And I jumped right out the opportunity. That's just kind of clear cut how it was. And I'm excited to be here. Like, I played with at least 4 or 5 of the players already. I know the coaching staff. I'm really close with Bree January. Played with her a year overseas. So it felt good. It felt easy to come in, get the plays running. Everybody's nice, welcoming.
New for me and Shey played overseas together in Turkey. In a team called Botosh. A club Botosh. And so this is not my first rodeo. I've always admired who she was as a player anyway. Very resilient player. She had her own story, and so we know and she knows how to win. And she's gonna teach us some things, gonna teach me some things. So I look forward to it. Plus, she was my roommate overseas, so this is like not new.
In basketball terms, what does Shey bring? Like, what should people be looking for?
Oh man, I think her run at DC, her run at Phoenix. She are really good at helping teams win games. Vet mindset, PG first. Doing what's necessary, and I think Shey. Also it's like you guys gotta get to know her. She's like a great person, so it's like that coupled with who she is as a person, it's just like it's perfect for us right now.
Shey Peddy talking, Kelsey Mitchell on Shey Peddy also talking there. And the benefit too is signing Shey Peddy at this point of the season is that she gets a 3 to 4 day runway leading up to the game. A luxury she did not have with the Sparks, as she mentioned, a luxury I don't think any of the Fever hardship waivers this season have really had. It's just been sign and go, sign and go, sign and go. I think they've hit it out of the park. Obviously, they're in McDonald. Chloe Bibby has been effective in stretches. Odyssey Sims, as she's gotten to settle in, has looked phenomenal. She was really good on Connecticut. I have a story up on her up at IndyStar.com. So, I mean, hopefully for the Fever's sake, this one clicks in as well. And then, like Chloe said, we'll see what they do here for that third hardship spot after Friday.
Yeah.
What else do you want to get to, Chloe, before we do some Q&A, and then we'll wrap things up, obviously, with the one that everybody's talking to us about?
I'm not sure if there's much else other than our kicker.
Yeah, we'll save the kicker. If you want to talk Summer I Turned Pretty while we start sifting through
Yes.
comments.
New episode of The Summer I Turned Pretty out today. Team Conrad. That's all. I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but if anyone wants to chat, let me know. I make my fiance watch it. He does not. I tell him all about it. He does not enjoy it.
Perfect. You got us through enough time to get the comments. This is one that we've gotten before. Just why don't the Fever waive Ari, Sydney, and sign Elizabeth Kitley and Serena Sundell? At least Fever can fill 12 roster spots.
I mean, they could technically do that. I think they don't really want to. In that case, that's obviously Sid and Ari, and I guess if they decided the same thing with Sophie as well, they would all still get paid through the end of the season. But I think when it comes to technicalities, I don't know, the CBA or what technicalities there are in, being a part of the roster, part of the team when it comes to being at practices, at games, and what privileges they would have if they, were waived from the team. But I think that's just something the Fever don't want to do. If they wanted to do that, if they were planning to do it, they would have done it by now. And instead of, going through this whole process to get hardship waivers, I just think it's something, they don't want to do.
And I think, too, they talk a lot about the chemistry inside the room and the energy that people bring. And Sydney Colson is one of those people. And I think that by eliminating that presence in the room, because she's still showing up to games, we've seen her at home games. I think she's been in every single home game since the injury. I just think that positivity and energy she brings is a real benefit on the bench. Obviously, you can't see it on the floor. And then the same thing, too, with the Sophie Cunningham. She was at practice today. And I'm sure that emotionally on the mental side of things, away from basketball, that's important to have. And and with Ari McDonald, I mean, that's the type of player that maybe they want to sign beyond this season too. And if you're going to waive her and cut her loose just because she's hurt, that's going to make that exponentially more difficult to do.
Yeah, that's another good point with, most players, Sophie Cunningham, Ari McDonald, Sydney Colson. I mean, I'm pretty sure Sydney Colson will be out most of next year as well. But with, Ari McDonald, Sophie Cunningham, who will hopefully likely be ready for the beginning of next year, if those are players they want to, hope re-sign, then this is, building up a lot of that goodwill as well.
Thank you for asking questions. We want Chloe, even Steph seems annoyed by your Caitlin Clark questions. I don't think you asked one today and I asked the one on Sunday, so we're going to go ahead and hide that comment. Just kidding. I don't actually care. I just thought that was funny. I guess everybody just wants to. Hey, Hank and Chloe, if Caitlin travels with the team to Minnesota, does that mean she's no longer ramping up to return like she did when she missed the Connecticut trip? I'll let you go first, then I have thoughts.
I don't think so. I honestly feel like she didn't go to Connecticut because it's a hike.
Yeah,
I know it's a hike. He knows it's a hike now with his fun experience in Connecticut. I mean, when you fly commercial, you have to connect from Indianapolis because there's no direct flights to Hartford, Connecticut. And then you have to drive an hour to, get there. And I think even in the case of the Fever, who charter, obviously, they flew into Providence,
Rhode Island,
and that's an hour and a half from Providence, Rhode Island to Uncasville, Connecticut. And it's honestly just a hike that, you might not want to have an injured player take, because most of these road trips, you're either multiple game road trips or they're just a lot easier to get to, because Minnesota, easy 1 hour flight, and then you're in the city. And with the one game, it's a 1 game trip to Connecticut. It's just a random one-off. You fly in Saturday and then you play Sunday afternoon and then you leave Sunday night. It's just seems like a lot of work, a lot of sitting in a bus for no reason, especially when it comes to going to Connecticut specifically because of how far away any airport is from that arena.
It's a lot of
So,
squeeze for not a lot of
yeah.
juice. And like
Yes.
if you're recovering from a groin injury, probably any injury really, probably one of the last things you want to do is sit in a bus, like Chloe said, for an hour, hour and a half, whatever it is, only to turn around and do it again as soon as the game's over when you're just sitting on the bench, not able to do anything. So I think for that trip specifically to Connecticut, it didn't make sense. Now, if that trip to Connecticut was followed up by a trip to, let's say, like New York or somebody else on the East Coast, I would be more apt to, I'd be questioning a little bit more. But I think superficially, like just putting the piece together and thinking about it critically, it just doesn't make sense to go there for a Sunday afternoon game, fly back in the same breath. So that's where I come back in that. Connecticut is wonderful for anybody who's it's way better than Chloe said.
Specifically, Uncasville, Connecticut.
It is surprisingly difficult to get to, but it's really pretty. As we continue to scroll comments here, obviously you can leave yours here in the comments. Chloe and I will just continue fielding them until the internet gives out. Caitlin is not practicing today is very telling. She's definitely not playing against the Lynx. Those are two sure losses. They play them back to back with Nafisha coming back also. I agree that she's probably not going to play in those two. I think you're of the same opinion. I don't agree that they're two sure losses because they beat them before without Caitlin Clark on the road in the Commissioner's Cup Championship. Obviously, they had Sophie Cunningham in that game and Erin McDonald. It was a different team, but I think if we've learned anything with the group, it's foolish to write them off. And then even within the realm of the WNBA, it really is just like anybody can beat anybody on any given night, which is kind of crazy unless you're the Chicago Sky, it seems like. So I don't know. I'd push back on that part, but it will be. I mean, you'd be really happy if they're able to salvage a split here with the Lynx on back-to-back days with Nafisha Collier coming back.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Nafisa's coming back for Friday's game. I haven't.
I thought she returned the other night, actually.
Okay. No, did she?
Yeah. Good show prep.
Yeah. Thank you.
You keep talking. I can look that up.
Nafisa Collier playing tonight. Injury update. Betting impact for Lynx.
This is live television, folks. This is really great. Chloe just pausing the show.
Well, you can keep talking.
I don't have anything else to talk about. I was waiting for you to give us some insight on the Nafisha Collier.
She was listed as doubtful on Tuesday. So she's gone from out to doubtful. So
she's coming back. She's getting closer. So, I mean, but even obviously the same with the – I mean, even without Nafisa Collier, I mean, that's still a really damn good team they have over there. And I think Kelsey Mitchell said that this is kind of like, well, we find out what we're made of. Kind of thing, like a measuring stick. I don't know if I would go that far with it because I don't think that the odds are necessarily fair for the Fever. But again, I'm not ready to write them off out of turn just because the team has a way about them of finding ways to win. Now that being said, obviously, I think that it's like you mentioned. I mean, it's an uphill climb. It's going to be tough.
Yeah.
That was a complete thought. Thank you.
I think it is also helpful that they're playing them back to back in a way because that's less prep. You know, technically, they're currently scheduled to practice on Saturday. I would not be surprised at all if they cancel that practice because they're playing them back to back. But it's just you have 4 days to prep for Minnesota, and then you play them twice in a row. I mean, it could either be seen as difficult. Obviously, Minnesota's the best team in the league, or it could also be seen as probably the best situation they could get in with having these 4 days to prep, and then. Minnesota is the only team they have to focus on for the next 2 games.
Yeah. Are there enough practices left for Caitlin to make a potential return? I don't think there is, and it feels like they're not being transparent. Let's start with are there enough practices for her to make a potential return? I mean,
I don't know.
It's hard to say.
It depends on, what the Fever consider to be practice time because kind of as the season has gone later on, they've moved more to like walkthroughs that are not open to media instead of, specific full-on, full-length, practices. So they're having 2 practices for sure this week, today and tomorrow. It seems like Caitlin will not be participating in either of them at this point. But let's look at their schedule for the rest of the season.
I mean, it goes every other day, I think. Like this might be the last stretch where they have multiple days off in a row before the end of the season, which is crazy.
Seems to be. There are a few games like they have 2 days off between Seattle and Los Angeles. They have 2 days off between Phoenix and Chicago.
A road game and then a home game.
Yeah. So, I mean, frankly, there aren't very many practices for her to return, but there are also, they have walkthroughs, which we don't know how much they practice in those walkthroughs. They have shoot arounds as well. They have, obviously Caitlin's been doing individual work, and I think, frankly, there aren't that many practices left for her to return. And then after, they end the regular season on September 9th, and then they have 5 days because the playoffs start on September 14th. So if anything, the most practice time they would have would be between the end of the regular season and the playoffs.
And it's the transparency thing. I mean, I don't know. I feel like the messaging has been the same. You're around the team. I've been around the team. They don't really have a reason to lie about any of this because the tickets are already sold. People are still going to games. I don't know. Yeah,
I mean, I don't think they're necessarily not being transparent. I think they honestly, as I've talked about multiple times in both these shows and in stories, like they just don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Like Sophie talked about it yesterday on her podcast, Caitlin herself doesn't know, Sophie said, and the training staff doesn't know for likely a multitude of reasons. Probably chief among them is that she's never had an injury like this before. She's never had a muscle injury, and muscle injuries can be fickle like that in the sense of you can feel great one day and then the next day you feel terrible. So I think it's a day-by-day process in getting her back to a point where she feels good multiple days in a row and then feels good to start returning to full-on basketball activities. I don't think I highly doubt it's anything that's, they're dragging fans along for ticket sales. They're
not hurting for ticket sales.
Along. Yeah.
They're not hurting for ratings. They're not hurting for attention. They're not hurting. They're just hurting for wins and able bodies on the freaking roster, honestly.
Yes.
But yeah, and I mean, Chloe brought up a really good point last week that I want to circle back to, in that if you try to play through some of these injuries, you can develop bad habits and hurt yourself in other ways. And there's a St. Louis Cardinals baseball player who had an injury, and I think it was actually a groin injury, and he tried to play through it, and he wound up causing himself another injury and developed bad habits. So it was kind of a double whammy. Obviously different sports, but the concept remains the same. And I understand that it's very easy to get narrow-minded and tunnel vision on this one season, but there's a whole freaking career to focus on.
Yeah, and I feel like it's, especially with this is her third major injury of the season. Obviously, she had that left groin injury. She came back after 2 weeks. And maybe, her groin, or not her left quad injury, that was her first injury out for 2 weeks at the beginning of the season. Then, she came back and 5 games later, she injured her left groin. So maybe they saw her left quad wasn't fully healed. So she was overcompensating with those groin muscles. And then she injured her left groin. And then when she came back from the left groin injury, maybe she was overcompensating and using her right groin muscle, too much, and ended up injuring that right groin. So I think a lot of it too is making sure she's not using her other muscles too much and overcompensating in that way. Like they want all 3 of these injured muscles to be fully healthy. They don't want her to develop bad habits, as you mentioned. They don't want her to overcompensate on different muscles, so then she'll strain or injure a different muscle, and they just want her to feel confident in returning the way she can as much as possible.
To give Chloe and I a chance to breathe, here's a clip with Stephanie White from Sunday where she talks about some of the injury things with Caitlin Clark and just how they're approaching it now. Break you have coming up, does that add more urgency or shift the timeline at all with Caitlin and her recovery?
It doesn't really shift anything with Caitlin. I think it continues to be, the most important thing is that she's 100% when she's ready to come back. The timing, it's never ideal, but her long-term health and wellness is the most important thing.
With her being the competitor she is, being kind of a younger player, is that something that you and the medical staff just kind of reiterate with her? Just, hey, it's okay, take your time, there's a big picture we got to think about here?
Yeah, and I think just the experience throughout the year, trying to come back and come back quickly, has also taught her, that she needs to make sure that she's 100%. And yes, every competitor wants to play. But at the same time, doing it the right way and making sure after we've had a couple of setbacks that we're prioritizing her long-term health and wellness is the most important thing. I mean, until she can get into practice and until you guys see her in practice, we're really status quo, same as we have been.
Still muted. Those are a couple clips there. Stephanie White, the first one from Sunday where she talked about, I asked the question just with where your team is in the standings, et cetera. Is there more urgency in her timeline? Does it speed it up? And as a coach and a staff, do you have to kind of caution her to, hey, it's okay, focus on your recovery, long-term stuff. And I thought that Stephanie White made a really interesting point in just that Caitlin Clark has been through this before now, 3 times, in fact. This is number 4. So she kind of understands the importance of taking it slow, taking her time, and making sure that she's back to fully 100% before she comes back in. I thought this was an interesting approach to it, an interesting question. Since Caitlin Clark is injured and missed most of this season, do you think she'll play in the Unrivaled League?
I don't think she'd play in Unrivaled specifically. If anything, she would play in Athletes Unlimited, would be my guess. Because, 3-on-3 is a much different type of game than obviously 5-on-5, just straight up basketball. And I don't think, she'd want to kind of shift her focus away from 5-on-5 in that way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously the fundamentals are the same, but 3-on-3 is faster. You play a little bit differently, and in some ways you can develop different habits in 3-on-3 that you don't want. You do things in 3-on-3 that you don't want to do in 5-on-5, and vice versa. So I think if she would play in any kind of off-season league, it would be Athletes Unlimited, because that is, a 5-on-5 league. And a lot of Fever players have played in Athletes Unlimited. And, Lexi Hull has. Shey Peddy, I think, has already signed to play in Athletes Unlimited this off-season. And I believe Kelsey Mitchell played at some point as well. So I think what is most likely is she doesn't play in any kind of off-season league, especially with these injuries. She doesn't want to risk, getting more injured again or kind of aggravating anything. But I guess we can see in that way.
Let's see. Last one from Caitlin Clark, because some of these are just devolving into silly theories, like Stephanie White wanting her bench, which is stupid.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, do you guys think the playoff push is honestly worth it, or should they try to tank and get into the lottery?
I would think a playoff push is worth it.
I would agree.
Just because, they've shown that they can obviously be successful without Caitlin Clark. Obviously not as successful as they are when she's there, but I don't think they should, tank the season with the talent they have. I think right now they're looking at a similar finish in the standings like they did last season with, between 6 and 8. And obviously it's not the season they hoped to have. And that obviously can be devolved to multiple things, 3 season-ending injuries, the breakup with DeWanna Bonner, just obviously Caitlin's ongoing injury where she only played 13 games this season. But I still don't think the season is a wash.
No, I don't either. And I think, I don't know, like just the way that the schedule ramps up, I feel like if they were to fall into lottery territory, it would not have to be intentional. I think that just the result of the schedule, the result of their situation. So if it happens, I think that it just kind of happens organically. Just breezing through a couple of these, I just wanted to point out that I don't think Stephanie White's ever really seemed annoyed with the Caitlin Clark questions. Certainly not among the local media contingent. Like there have been times when I've asked her multiple times in the same day about Caitlin Clark. And just last Sunday, I asked her back-to-back questions. She was great, really insightful answers. I mean, that clip was 60 to 90 seconds of just, good quality insight, obviously. She's done a good job handling all of that. Thank you, John. That's very kind of you. More silliness about not even going to put that up there because it's just aggressively silly. But yeah, if there's any other questions, go ahead and slip in. We'll hang out here for a few more minutes. Chloe, where do you set the bar now? We got the back-to-back to Minnesota, and then what is it, LA? So over this 3-game stretch, what do you think? What's your prediction here? Seattle. And then LA. So 4-game stretch. What do you think they're going to do?
4-game stretch. I think the floor would be 1-3. So obviously the back-to-back against Minnesota is tough. They have beaten Seattle 3 times this season, even though Seattle's kind of they lost like 6 or 7 games in a row.
They're starting to bounce back, aren't they?
Yeah, they are starting to bounce back. I feel like they're going to come out, really hard against Los Angeles because Los Angeles is, worse than them, and they've lost to them 3 times. So I could see anywhere between 1-3 and 3-1 in this 4-game stretch.
It is. I feel like they're going to find a way to split with Minnesota. LA just feels like a loss. And then, like you said, they've had a mastery over Seattle, but that hasn't really mattered. It didn't matter last week against Dallas. It didn't matter last week against Washington. So who knows?
Well, they did lose to Washington at the beginning of the season too.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. It still felt like a game they should have won with the way that it came out at the end. So that's kind of the prediction. I think they get into the playoffs. A first-round loss sounds reasonable. And honestly, getting into the playoffs, I feel like given everything that's happened, you put it in the context, I feel like that's a successful season. A big win, honestly, getting in.
I honestly think best case scenario for Indiana would be to match up with Atlanta wherever they end up being, whether Atlanta's 2 and Indiana's 7 or 3 and 6, because the Fever have had a lot of success. They obviously haven't played Atlanta since who knows when. They played them 3 times in the first 3 weeks of the season, and then haven't played them since July. The funness of WNBA scheduling. But when they did play Indiana at the beginning of the season, or when they played Atlanta, they went 3-1 against them. So they've shown they can beat Atlanta. Obviously, that was with a different team. When Aerie was there, I think Caitlin was obviously playing some of those games. Sophie was obviously playing those games. So, but they've shown that they can beat Atlanta.
Yep.
So.
Yep. Let's see. Ooh, I like this one. What do you guys think the front office is going to looking to find going into the new season player-wise? It's basically a free hit. So, so everybody's free agent basically. There could be a lockout, there could be whatever, but let's just say, I think we've played this scenario before, but let's say everything is fine, and let's just build with the roster they have now. What pieces would you want to add to this group?
I feel like they need someone like Demi Finlay. As I've said the entire season, they're really missing somebody like Temi Finlay, and should they have protected her in the expansion draft? Probably.
Expound upon that. Why should they have kept her?
Because she's a great rim runner. She was the first person, when Caitlin was a rookie last year, she was the first person that showed she could keep up with that kind of pace. She could run, she could catch those football passes down, half the full court passes, and she was the only one that could do it in the first 10-15 games of the season. And she really just fit well with that fast pace that they want to play and the kind of pace that Caitlin wants to play. And I think they were really missing her this year, and I think that was kind of something they tried to obviously bring DeWanna Bonner in for, and that obviously did not work out. Mm-hmm. So they've been kind of missing that stretch 4 kind of aspect,
which they hope to bring in with Chloe Bibby, and have done so with mixed results, I'd say.
Yeah.
It's going to be a fun offseason, as we've discussed before. You were so right, Chloe. Anytime we get a chance to spotlight Chloe, we'll do that. Obviously, somebody else calling for the owner to be fired. That's fun. I don't think that's how it works, and maybe the front office, whatever. So yeah, that was fun, more rational at times than I thought it was going to be based on the mentions on Twitter. So good job for those who commented rationally. So this week, there's a game coming up on Friday against the Lynx. Chloe's going to have Fever practice coverage tomorrow. We both have stories from avoid the geriatric players. They're too slow. Jesus.
The thing about their older players, obviously, Odyssey Sims and Shey Peddy are both, in their 30s. I think Sims is 32, Peddy's 36. But it's also when you're in this kind of hardship situation, you don't have many options. Mm-hmm. You don't have that mid-20s player in their prime who has the WNBA experience to come in and just plug into a team. So you kind of have to pick your battles in that way, because if you want a younger player, they're not going to have that much experience in the W, and they're not going to be able to plug in as quickly. But if you have those players that have the experience, they're not going to be as fast.
Yeah, and at the I mean, there's a reason that Odyssey Sims has ramped up the way that she has, is because she's used to this, and it's going to be the same thing. Obvious here with Shey Peddy is that they've been in these situations before. They're familiar with what it takes, the pressures, and how to address and handle all the things that come into being signed for 7 days. Because obviously they're fighting for their jobs, they're trying to stick around and maintain this opportunity. So there's a lot of value in that veteran leadership, especially with a team like the Fever, who talking about coming into the season. I mean, they are a very young team at the core. Obviously, they have a Kelsey Mitchell who brings some experience. Sophie Cunningham has some years under her belt, but I mean, Caitlin Clark's in her second year. Lee Boston's in her third year. Lexi Hall's third or fourth year. Like, there's a lot of youth on that roster, and having that veteran leadership to kind of tie it all together is really valuable and really important. Somebody says, I'll make this more polite. Kelsey should be the veteran leadership we need. I mean, it's not a one-person job.
Yeah.
I would argue too. Like, you need more of that veteran leadership, and leadership comes in different forms. Like the way that Sophie Cunningham leads and Aaliyah Boston leads are different from each other, and then it's also different from how Kelsey Mitchell leads, and that's something that Stephanie White talked about today. It's different than Sydney Colson and what she does. So, yeah, I think that leadership takes a lot of different forms, and that's a lot of value in having some of those geriatric players, as Mark Barnum put it. I guess I'm a geriatric because I'm about the same age as Kelsey Mitchell. So good for me, sir. Good for me for continuing to kick, and no problem there, Emily. I thought yours was much more polite than most everything else we've gotten. But that's all we have for today. I'm going to imagine that Chloe and I will be back on Friday, following Friday night's game. Then Chloe's out to Minneapolis for the game 2 against the Lynx. So be sure to tune in on Saturday night. Be sure to subscribe to us here on YouTube. Friday night. What did I say? Saturday. Be sure to subscribe and watch on Friday night. Be sure to subscribe. Follow us both on Twitter. We'll have updates on when the show is. Ring the bell for notifications. I think on YouTube is how you do it, and that's how you get notified on live videos when we go live. Thank you all so much for watching, and we will talk to you again in a couple days.